A quiet morning inside a private hospital suddenly spirals into chaos when a furious mistress storms into the maternity ward and kicks a pregnant woman to the ground, while the millionaire husband stands frozen, watching it happen. But neither of them realizes that the man running this hospital isn't just any doctor. He's her uncle, and when he discovers what they've done, justice comes faster than anyone expects. What unfolds next is a fight for truth, redemption, and the power of one man who turns pain into purpose and tragedy into change. Stay with me, because this story will show you how compassion can rise from cruelty, and you won't believe the ending until you hear it. Tell us what time you're listening and where you're tuning in from, and don't forget to leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. The air inside the maternity room felt still, almost sacred. A low mechanical hum blended with the soft rhythm of a fetal heartbeat echoing through the monitor beside the bed. Claire Donovan, 30 years old and 7 months pregnant, rested her hand gently on her stomach. The sound calmed her, each pulse reminding her that her baby was safe for now. The nurse had stepped out to collect her test results, leaving her alone in a quiet moment she rarely found anymore. Her marriage to Ethan Hale, the real estate millionaire everyone admired, had become a cold performance. He used to text her between meetings, leave small notes on her pillow, kiss her belly each morning before work. Now he sent assistants to deliver messages. His voice had grown distant, his eyes always elsewhere. Claire still believed love could survive distance. She still hoped this baby would remind him of the man he once was. She adjusted the blanket across her knees and smiled faintly at the monitor. "You're strong, sweetheart," she whispered. "You and me will be all right." The machine answered her with another steady beat. That tiny rhythm had become her reason to keep breathing. The door opened suddenly. The noise startled her so much she flinched. Ethan stood in the doorway, wearing his tailored suit, expensive watch glinting under the fluorescent light. For one suspended second, relief crossed her face. He came. Maybe he remembered. But then another figure appeared behind him. A tall woman in a crimson dress, poised, confident, beautiful in a way that looked rehearsed. "Ethan," Claire said softly, confusion thick in her voice. "What is she doing here?" Vanessa Cole's lips curved into a perfect smile, the kind meant to wound. "He wanted me to see where the magic happens," she said coolly. Her perfume filled the small room. The scent of roses clashed with the sterile air. Ethan shifted awkwardly but did not deny it. "Vanessa, please," he muttered, eyes darting toward Claire's face. Claire pushed herself up slightly on the bed, her pulse racing. "You brought her here," she said. "To my appointment. To my baby's appointment." "It's not what you think," Ethan said, his voice low but unconvincing. "We were meeting with someone from the hospital board." Vanessa laughed under her breath. "Stop pretending, Ethan. She deserves the truth." Then she looked at Claire, her tone dripping with mock sympathy. "He's been trying to tell you for months. You just refuse to listen." Color drained from Claire's face. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Vanessa stepped closer, her heels clicking sharply against the tile. "You think carrying his child will keep him," she said. "That's adorable, but pathetic." Ethan finally spoke, his voice trembling between guilt and irritation. "Vanessa, enough." "No, no," she snapped back. "You've let her manipulate you long enough." Her eyes flicked toward Claire. "Look at her. She still thinks she's the victim." Claire's vision swam. She could feel her heart pounding too fast, her skin damp with sweat. "Please stop," she whispered. "I can't do this right now." Vanessa folded her arms. "Oh, I think you can. You've been performing for years. Why stop now?" The tension in the room thickened until even the machines seemed to hesitate. Claire gripped the edge of the bed to steady herself. A sharp pain shot across her abdomen. She winced and gasped. "Something's wrong," she said, her voice barely audible. Ethan took one step forward, unsure what to do. Vanessa's eyes narrowed with contempt. "You see," she said coldly, "always the drama, always the victim." Claire tried to reach for the call button, but her hand trembled. "I need a doctor," she said through clenched teeth. Vanessa moved closer, towering over her. "Here's a piece of advice, Claire. Learn when to let go. You're embarrassing yourself." Her words felt like ice pressed against skin. Claire tried to stand but stumbled, one hand on her belly, the other gripping the side rail. The pain sharpened, tearing through her like fire. "Please," she cried. "Don't." Vanessa's voice dropped to a whisper. "You don't deserve him." Then, in a burst of anger, she lifted her leg and kicked Claire's shin with deliberate force. The sound of impact echoed through the room. Claire's cry filled the air as her body folded against the exam table. The monitor crashed to the floor with a heavy clang. The rhythmic heartbeat faltered, its steady tone breaking into erratic blips. The metallic scent of blood spread quickly, staining the pale sheet beneath her. Claire collapsed to her knees, both arms cradling her stomach, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The room spun. Her hair clung to her damp face, her lips trembling. "Please," she whispered, voice breaking. "My baby." Vanessa stood motionless for a moment, chest rising fast, eyes wild with what looked like satisfaction and fear tangled together. Then she straightened, smoothing her hair as if nothing had happened. Her reflection in the metal cabinet stared back at her, composed, detached, untouched. Ethan remained frozen near the door, face drained of color, unable to process what had just occurred. The man who once promised protection now couldn't move. His wife was on the ground bleeding, the woman beside him breathing hard, her red dress glowing under harsh fluorescent light like a wound that refused to close. Claire tried to crawl toward the corner of the bed, reaching blindly for the monitor cable, as if the sound of her baby's heartbeat could save them both. But the machine lay broken, silent. All she could hear was her own pulse, fast and uneven. She lifted her head toward Ethan, eyes full of disbelief. "You let her do this," she whispered. "You stood there." Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came. Vanessa turned to him and said calmly, "She brought it on herself." Her tone was smooth, her voice steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her bracelet. The lie hung heavy in the air, as sharp and poisonous as the truth itself. Claire's vision dimmed at the edges. She lowered her head, both hands pressed over her belly. Her body shook with silent sobs, each one weaker than the last. The room smelled of blood and perfume. The light flickered once, as if the world itself had blinked in disbelief. In that moment, nothing else existed, not the hallway outside, not the life she once dreamed of, not even Ethan's face. There was only the sound of her shallow breathing and the weight of what had just happened. And in that terrible silence, as Claire's tears touched the cold tile floor, something inside her shifted forever. The sound of crashing metal had barely faded when the first scream echoed down the corridor. A nurse burst through the door, stopping cold at the sight of blood on the tile, and Claire curled on the floor. For a moment, time fractured into chaos. Another nurse followed, shouting orders, and the quiet maternity wing erupted into confusion. "Call a doctor!" someone yelled. The alarm button flashed red. Within seconds, voices filled the hallway, and the sterile calm of the hospital dissolved into panic. Vanessa stood frozen beside the exam table, her hands trembling, her mind racing to build the story that might save her. "She fell," she said quickly. "I tried to help her. She lost her balance." Her voice shook, but her words came smooth, rehearsed. The first lie was always the easiest. Ethan knelt beside his wife, his suit stained dark with blood. "Claire, can you hear me?" he asked, his voice breaking. Claire's eyes fluttered open, her breathing shallow. "Help the baby," she whispered. "Please." The nurse pressed her hand to Claire's pulse, eyes widening at the speed of her heartbeat. "Get a stretcher," the nurse ordered. "We're losing time." The corridor filled with footsteps, radio calls, and gasps from onlookers. Visitors and patients peeked from their rooms as whispers spread. Everyone wanted to know what had happened inside room 7. One woman said she heard shouting. Another swore she saw a man and a woman fighting. By the time security arrived, the story had already twisted into rumor. Vanessa straightened her posture, wiping invisible dust from her dress. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice steadying. "She's unstable. Everyone knows she's been under stress." The security officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, I need you to stay right here until we get statements." "Statements?" she repeated, feigning outrage. "I'm the one who tried to help her. You should be thanking me." Ethan looked up, his expression dazed. "Just let them work," he muttered. His voice lacked conviction, each word hollow. Claire was lifted onto the stretcher. Her blood left small smears across the white sheet as nurses hurried her toward the emergency wing. The monitors beeped rapidly, filling the hallway with a sound that made everyone stop and stare. "She's hemorrhaging," one nurse whispered. "Where's the obstetric team?" Vanessa watched them disappear down the corridor, then turned toward Ethan. "If anyone asks, she slipped. That's what happened. You saw it yourself." He stared at her, disbelief and fear mixing in his eyes. "Vanessa, I can't lie about this." "You don't have to lie," she snapped quietly. "You just have to stop her from ruining your life. Do you want the board to hear you let your wife cause a public scene in a hospital? Think about your reputation." His reputation. The words hit him harder than truth ever could. For years, everything he built rested on control. Control of his image, his success, his perfect life. He could already imagine tomorrow's headlines: "Millionaire's pregnant wife injured during hospital fight." The thought chilled him more than the sight of blood. When the elevator doors closed around Claire and the nurses, the noise in the hallway shifted from urgency to gossip. Phones appeared in hands. Someone whispered, "That's Ethan Hale, isn't it?" Another voice replied, "Yes, from Hale Development. His wife's pregnant." The speculation spread like smoke through dry air. Vanessa crossed her arms and faced the security officer. "Can I go now?" she demanded. "No, ma'am," he replied firmly. "We'll need an official statement for the incident report." "Oh, I already told you what happened," she said sharply. She tripped, panicked, and fell. "It's not my fault if she's dramatic." The officer nodded slowly, making notes on his clipboard. His eyes betrayed doubt. He had seen plenty of scenes like this, wealthy people trying to twist truth before the evidence could catch up. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, leaving a streak of red across his temple without realizing it. The smell of iron clung to him. "I need to see her," he said under his breath. "I need to make sure she's all right." Vanessa stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You need to think. You rush after her now, and everyone will assume guilt. Stay calm, act normal, and we'll fix this." He stared at her, feeling the words but not hearing them. Somewhere inside, the realization had already begun. There was no fixing what had just happened. Down the corridor, a small group of staff whispered near the nurse's station. "They're saying the marketing director hit her," one of them murmured. "No, kicked her," another corrected. "Right in the leg." The rumor spread faster than the truth could form. By the time it reached the lobby, it had become a scandal. When Dr. Elena Martinez arrived, the hallway parted to let her through. Her calm authority silenced the noise. "Where is she?" she asked. "Emergency obstetrics," a nurse answered. "Severe trauma, possible preeclampsia." "Doctor." Martinez turned to the security officer. "Keep everyone who was in that room available for questioning." Her gaze locked on Vanessa and Ethan for a moment, sharp and unyielding. "That includes both of them." Vanessa bristled. "You can't keep us here. I have nothing to do with this." "Then you have nothing to fear," Dr. Martinez replied, walking away. The hallway fell into uneasy quiet. Cameras near the ceiling blinked red. The security system recorded every movement, every expression. Later, that footage would tell the truth no one wanted to face. Ethan stood near the door, still staring at the floor, where his wife's blood remained in small, dark stains. His reflection in the metal cabinet looked like a stranger's, pale, shaken, hollow. Vanessa reached for his arm, but he stepped away. "I need to think," he said quietly. She smiled thinly. "Think fast. The press moves quicker than guilt." He didn't answer. He walked toward the elevators, not to find Claire but to escape the noise, the whispers, and the truth closing around him. Behind him, a janitor began mopping the floor. The sound of the mop dragging through blood was the only thing that broke the silence. The smell of bleach replaced the scent of perfume. By the time the hallway was clean, only the memory of what happened remained, a memory that could never be erased. Outside the maternity wing, the hospital lobby buzzed with quiet speculation. No one yet knew her name, but everyone had already taken sides. And as the doors to the emergency floor closed behind Claire Donovan, her world and Ethan's had already split beyond repair. The doors to the emergency unit swung open as the medical team rushed Claire into the trauma bay. Bright lights hit her face, blinding and cold. Voices layered over one another, sharp and urgent, pressure dropping, pulse unstable. "We need fluids now." Her body trembled uncontrollably as she clutched the sheet beneath her fingers. Somewhere deep inside, she still heard the faint echo of her baby's heartbeat through the portable monitor. It was weak but steady, a sound fighting to exist. "Doctor," Elena Martinez moved fast, gloved hands hovering over Claire's abdomen. "Get me her vitals. Set up an IV line. I want obstetrics and anesthesia here immediately." Nurses surrounded the table, attaching monitors, cutting through fabric, checking the bleeding. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. The beeping machines created a rhythm of tension, a kind of mechanical prayer. Claire's lips moved, but no words came out. Her skin looked pale under the fluorescent light, her breathing shallow. "Stay with me, honey," one nurse whispered, wiping sweat from her forehead. "You're going to be okay." The curtain rustled open again, and the chief of surgery, Dr. William Matthews, stepped inside. His silver hair and calm presence brought an instant hush to the room. He had been the hospital's director for 15 years, a man known for discipline, not sentiment. But as he looked at the woman on the bed, his composure shattered. For a moment, he froze. "Elena," he said quietly. "What's her name?" "Claire Donovan," the doctor replied without looking up. 30 years old, 7 months pregnant, blunt trauma to the abdomen, possible internal bleeding. The name struck him like lightning. His eyes widened. "Repeat that," he said. "Claire Donovan," she repeated, still focused on the monitor. He stepped closer, staring at the patient's face, the curve of her jaw, the faint scar near her eyebrow, the one he remembered from childhood summers. "Oh my God," he whispered. "She's my niece." The staff exchanged startled glances, unsure how to react. But Dr. Matthews straightened quickly, pulling his mask into place. "Nobody leaves this room," he ordered. "We do everything we can to save her and that baby." His tone left no room for hesitation. Claire's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then filled with confusion. "Uncle William?" she breathed weakly. He leaned down, his gloved hand brushing against hers. "I'm here, sweetheart," he said, voice thick with emotion. "You're safe now. I promise." Tears welled at the corners of her eyes. "He let her hurt me," she whispered. He just stood there. His jaw tightened. "Don't talk. You need to rest. We'll deal with that later." He looked toward Dr. Martinez. "How's the baby?" The younger doctor checked the ultrasound probe. "Fetal heart rate's unstable. We might have placental separation. We need to stabilize the mother first." "Do it," he said. "I'll assist." The team moved like a single organism, efficient and focused. Fluids ran through the IV lines. Blood pressure numbers flickered on the monitor. The sound of suction filled the air. Every movement felt like a battle against time. Outside the operating area, word of the emergency began to spread. Hospital staff whispered in corners, wondering why the director himself was assisting in a trauma case. Some said the patient was a VIP, others thought it was political. No one imagined it was personal. Inside, the minutes stretched thin. Claire drifted in and out of consciousness, her mind floating between the present and fragments of memory. She saw her uncle's kitchen in the summer light, smelled coffee, heard laughter. "You used to make pancakes," she murmured faintly, "with strawberries." Dr. Matthews swallowed hard. "And you always stole the first one," he said softly, forcing a small smile. "You're still stubborn. Hold on for me. Hold on for her." 9-2. The baby's heartbeat slowed, then steadied again. A nurse adjusted the oxygen mask, glancing at the clock. "We've got improvement," she said, heart rate stabilizing. Relief washed through the room like a collective exhale. Dr. Martinez looked up. "We're not out of danger yet, but she's responding." Dr. Matthews closed his eyes for half a second, whispering something only he could hear. Then he refocused, his voice calm and firm. "Prepare for ultrasound imaging. I want to see internal damage before we move forward." For the next 20 minutes, silence ruled, except for the hum of machines and short bursts of medical instructions. Sweat beaded across foreheads. The air felt heavy, thick with urgency and hope intertwined. At last, Dr. Martinez nodded. "She's stable enough for now. We'll monitor closely. The baby's heartbeat is fragile, but holding steady." Dr. Matthews stepped back, removing his gloves with slow precision. The weight of emotion he had kept buried for years pressed against his chest. He had lost contact with his sister after a family dispute decades ago. He hadn't known her daughter had grown up, married, and moved back to the city. Now, by some cruel twist of fate, she had been brought into his hospital broken and bleeding. He looked at her face, pale but peaceful now, and felt both guilt and purpose flooding in. "You found your way back to me," he whispered under his breath. "And I won't lose you again." Dr. Martinez approached him quietly. "We'll keep her under observation for the next few hours," she said. "She needs rest, the baby too." He nodded, his voice steady once more. "Good work, everyone. Keep full surveillance on her vitals. I want updates every 10 minutes. As the team dispersed, he remained by the bedside, watching the faint rise and fall of her chest. Claire slept, her hand still resting protectively over her stomach. The monitor beeped softly beside her, a fragile lullaby. Through the glass wall, he could see the hallway buzzing with controlled movement. Security officers spoke to staff. Reporters had not yet arrived, but he knew they would. There would be questions about the assault, about the people responsible, about the truth. He would face them when the time came. For now, only one thing mattered: the woman on the bed, and the life she carried. He leaned closer, his voice a whisper meant only for her. "You're safe, Claire. No one will hurt you again." For the first time that night, the rhythm of the machines evened out, calm and constant, like the slow return of order after chaos. But outside that room, the storm was only beginning to form. Morning light broke through the clouds outside Riverside Medical Center, but inside the walls of the administrative floor, the air remained tense. The night's chaos had left ripples through every department. Nurses whispered in corners, staff avoided eye contact, and rumors circulated like invisible smoke. Everyone had heard about the assault in the maternity ward. No one dared speak about the fact that the hospital's director had been inside the trauma bay all night. Dr. William Matthews stepped into his office, his shoulders heavy with exhaustion. He had not slept, yet his mind was sharp, fueled by anger and responsibility. On his desk lay a preliminary report detailing the incident. At the bottom of the page were two familiar names, Ethan Hale and Vanessa Cole. He read them twice, each letter tightening his jaw. He pressed the intercom button. "Find both of them," he told his assistant. "Bring them to conference room B. I want security present." His voice was calm but absolute. No one questioned his tone. Downstairs, Vanessa sat in the waiting area outside administration. Her red dress from the previous night looked out of place under the sterile lights. The color that once gave her confidence now drew stares. Beside her, Ethan sat in silence, his hands clasped, his eyes hollow. The sleepless hours had stripped the arrogance from his face. The silence between them was louder than any accusation. The door opened, and a security officer gestured for them to follow. "Dr. Matthews will see you now." They entered the room together. The blinds were half drawn, letting in a narrow beam of morning sunlight that cut across the polished table. Dr. Matthews stood at the far end, his posture straight, his expression unreadable. The silver in his hair caught the light, lending him a quiet authority that filled the space before he even spoke. "Sit down," he said. His voice was steady but cold. Vanessa crossed her arms but obeyed. Ethan hesitated, then followed. Dr. Matthews studied them for a long moment before speaking again. "You both understand why you're here?" Vanessa forced a tight smile. "We already explained what happened. It was an accident." She slipped. He raised an eyebrow. "An accident," he repeated slowly. "Then explain to me why there's a security report detailing visible bruising consistent with impact, and why my staff had to clean blood from the exam room floor." Vanessa's mouth opened, then closed again. "I didn't touch her," she said. He turned his attention to Ethan. "And you, Mr. Hale? Were you a witness to this accident?" Ethan's eyes flickered toward Vanessa before meeting the doctor's gaze. "I didn't see everything," he said quietly. "It all happened fast." Dr. Matthews took a step forward. "Let me make something clear. This is not a social scandal. This is a criminal matter that took place inside a medical facility. A pregnant woman was injured under my roof. I don't care how much money you have, or how influential your name is. You will answer for it." Vanessa shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Are you threatening us?" she asked. He leaned forward slightly, his tone even sharper. "No, I'm reminding you that my responsibility is to the law, not to people who think they're above it." The words hung in the air. Ethan swallowed hard, unable to respond. "Doctor," Matthews turned to the security officer standing by the door. "I want all surveillance footage from the maternity corridor and room 7 reviewed immediately. Forward a copy to the police liaison. I'll handle the rest." Vanessa's confidence cracked. "You can't do that without a formal complaint." He looked at her, his expression calm but deadly serious. "The complaint has already been filed, by me, as the director of this hospital." Her eyes widened. "You can't be serious. You are—" "Oh, I am," he said quietly. "And if you're wondering why I care so deeply, it's because the woman you assaulted is my niece." The color drained from her face. Ethan looked up sharply, shock replacing exhaustion. "Your niece?" he repeated. Dr. Matthews nodded once. "Yes, Claire Donovan. And even if she were a stranger, I would do the same thing. But she is not a stranger. She is family. And after last night, this institution will stand on her side, not yours. That—" Vanessa rose to her feet, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is absurd. You're biased. You can't run an investigation when you're personally involved." He didn't move. "Then you're free to take that argument to court. I welcome it." Ethan finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "Dr. Matthews, please. I didn't hurt her. I swear I didn't. I froze. I didn't know what to do." The doctor studied him, eyes narrowing slightly. "Then you're guilty of silence, Mr. Hale. And silence, when someone is being hurt, is its own form of cruelty." The room went still. The clock on the wall ticked audibly. Vanessa's confidence had dissolved entirely. Dr. Matthews walked to the door, signaling the meeting was over. "Security will escort you out. Both of you are prohibited from entering the maternity ward or contacting any member of the medical team until further notice." Vanessa started to protest, but he raised his hand. "Enough. I've heard enough lies for one morning. The next time you speak, it will be to the authorities." The officer stepped forward. Ethan stood slowly, shoulders slumped, the weight of guilt pressing down harder than pride ever could. Vanessa hesitated, then turned sharply and left the room without looking back. When the door closed behind them, Dr. Matthews exhaled for the first time in hours. He walked toward the window, staring down at the parking lot below. Ambulances came and went. Life continued outside, indifferent to the storms inside. He placed a hand on the windowsill, his reflection faint in the glass. "You're safe now, Claire," he murmured to himself. "And I won't let them near you again." The morning sun brightened slowly, touching the edge of the city beyond. For the first time since the attack, the hospital felt steady again, anchored not by fear, but by the authority of a man who had finally chosen what was right. But deep in his chest, Dr. Matthews knew this was only the beginning. The world outside these walls was waiting for answers, and soon, justice would have to leave the hospital and face the public. The first light of morning filtered through the hospital blinds, brushing soft golden lines across the recovery room. Machines hummed quietly, their steady rhythm filling the silence like a heartbeat made of electricity and hope. Claire Donovan opened her eyes slowly. The world looked blurred at first, hazy from medication and exhaustion. She felt something warm wrapped around her hand. When her vision cleared, she saw her uncle, Dr. William Matthews, sitting beside the bed, still in his white coat. His eyes were tired but gentle, the kind that spoke of sleepless hours and unbroken resolve. "Uncle," she whispered, her voice thin and cracked. He leaned closer, squeezing her hand. "You're awake," he said softly. "You're safe now." Her lips trembled. "The baby?" His eyes softened, and for a moment the stern hospital director vanished, replaced by the man who once taught her how to ride a bike and patch scraped knees. "She's holding on," he said. "Her heart is strong. You both made it through the night." Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. "I thought I lost her," she whispered. "You didn't," he said. "You fought, and she fought with you." He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "You're both stronger than you think." Claire turned her head slightly, looking toward the window. Morning sunlight painted the wall in soft colors that reminded her of peace she no longer trusted. "I saw her face," she said suddenly. "Vanessa." She smiled after it happened, like she wanted me to suffer. Dr. Matthews' expression hardened. "Don't think about her," he said. "She's not your concern anymore." Claire swallowed, her voice shaking. "She kicked me, Uncle." She didn't hesitate. Ethan just stood there. He didn't even move. He closed his eyes for a moment, collecting the anger before it could spill over. When he spoke again, his tone was calm, but cold. "I know. I've read every report, watched the security footage, and spoken to the staff who were there. The truth is clear. What happened to you was not an accident, and it will not be ignored. Claire's breathing hitched. They won't stop, she said weakly. People like them never stop. They'll twist it. They'll make me look crazy. He straightened in his chair. Then we'll untwist it, he said. They might have money, but I have something stronger. The truth and the power to make it heard. No. For a moment, neither spoke. Only the quiet rhythm of the monitor filled the space between them. Claire's fingers tightened around his hand. I don't want revenge, she said softly. I just want my child to live without fear. His voice lowered. That's exactly what justice is, Claire, making sure no one else has to live in fear because of them. She looked at him, her eyes searching. You promise? I promise, he said. You rest now. I'll take care of the rest. Oh. Her eyelids fluttered, heavy with fatigue. As she drifted back toward sleep, she whispered, Thank you, Uncle William. He waited until her breathing steadied before standing. When he stepped into the hallway, the hospital was already awake. Nurses moved between rooms with quiet efficiency, but tension lingered in the air. Word of the assault had spread far beyond the maternity wing. He walked toward his office with purpose. His reflection in the glass panels looked older than he remembered, lined with the burden of both family and duty. He picked up the phone on his desk and dialed a familiar number. It's Matthews, he said when the other end answered. I need you to prepare a full legal report and submit a copy of the footage to the authorities. Yes, everything from the last 12 hours. Also, contact our public relations director. We'll be issuing a statement today. He paused, glancing out the window toward the city skyline. No spin, he added firmly. We're not protecting anyone's reputation. We're protecting what's right. He hung up and stood by the window for a long moment, his mind tracing through the details. Vanessa Cole would bring her lawyers. Ethan Hale would bring his influence. But neither could erase the truth recorded on hospital cameras or the testimonies of his staff. This fight would not be fought with violence, but with precision and exposure. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, flooding his office with light. When he finally returned to Claire's room, she was awake again, propped up on a pillow, a little color back in her cheeks. She looked fragile but alive, her strength quiet and steady. Did you sleep? He asked. A little, she said. I had a dream about the baby. She was laughing. He smiled faintly. That's a good dream. She nodded. You were there too. He pulled a chair close. I'll be here every day until you walk out of this place. Her eyes glistened. You really think we'll win? I don't think, he said. I know. The room grew still again. Outside the window, the world went on. Cars, clouds, and the ordinary sounds of life that no longer felt ordinary to either of them. He placed his hand over hers once more. You've done your part, Claire. Now let me do mine. Yeah. She exhaled slowly, her fear giving way to exhaustion and fragile hope. Okay, she said. But promise me something. Don't let them twist what happened. Don't let them turn me into a story they can control. He nodded solemnly. I won't. The truth will belong to you, not them. The light in the room softened as afternoon settled. He stood, smoothing his coat. Rest now, he said quietly. You need strength for what comes next. As he stepped into the hallway, a flicker of movement caught his eye through the glass. Down the corridor, a woman in a dark suit was speaking with security. Her red hair gleamed under the fluorescent lights. It was Vanessa Cole, back in the building, flanked by her lawyer. A look of arrogance painted across her face. Dr. Matthews paused. The exhaustion that had weighed on him turned into quiet determination. He watched her for a long second, then turned toward his office. For every act of cruelty, there would be an answer. And this time, it would begin with him. The city woke restless. Morning news anchors spoke in urgent tones as headlines flashed across every screen. Violence in Riverside Medical Center. Pregnant woman assaulted by business executive's associate. The words were bold, unforgiving, and impossible to ignore. Every network ran the footage. Every radio host dissected the story. And social media burned with outrage. In less than 12 hours, Vanessa Cole's name had become a synonym for cruelty. Inside her downtown apartment, the walls of glass reflected her face from a dozen angles. She stood barefoot in front of the television, her crimson robe loose at the shoulders, her hair unkempt from a sleepless night. The news replayed the hospital corridor footage. Though the camera caught only fragments, it was enough. A figure in a red dress, a sudden movement, a body collapsing. The audio of Claire's cry, faint but unmistakable, echoed through the room. Vanessa grabbed the remote and muted the sound, but silence didn't save her. Her phone vibrated again and again on the counter, lighting up with messages. Some from reporters, some from sponsors, some from numbers she didn't recognize. Every notification felt like a bruise. She poured herself a glass of white wine and tried to steady her breathing. "It will blow over," she whispered to her reflection in the glass wall. "It always does." But even as she said it, her voice faltered. On the opposite side of town, the boardroom of Hale Development was in chaos. Ethan sat at the head of the long marble table, surrounded by his partners and legal advisors. Charts of plunging stock values glowed on the wall screen. "We're down 20% in a single day," one of the directors said. "The media won't let go of it. You need to make a public statement." Ethan rubbed his temples. "I already said I wasn't involved." Then why does your mistress's name appear in every headline?" another voice snapped. "People think this company protects abusers. They're boycotting our developments. Investors are furious." He leaned back, exhausted, his mind trapped between guilt and pride. Every word from his lawyers blurred into noise. The empire he had built on charm and control was collapsing, and it all began with a single moment of silence, his own. Back in the apartment, Vanessa opened her laptop. The first email she read was from a luxury brand she had represented for 5 years. Partnership terminated effective immediately. The next was from her publicist. Crisis team recommends temporary social media deactivation and legal defense strategy. The polite tone made it worse. Her life was being erased through formal sentences and polite signatures. She scrolled through her online profiles. Thousands of comments flooded each post. Once, her name was celebrated for beauty and ambition. Now it was cursed in every language imaginable. "Monster. How could you kick a pregnant woman? You belong in prison." Her hand shook as she closed the laptop. "They don't know the truth," she muttered. They didn't see what really happened, but even she no longer believed the lie. By afternoon, reporters had gathered outside her apartment building. Cameras flashed as she stepped into the lobby with sunglasses hiding her swollen eyes. "Miss Cole," one shouted, "do you have anything to say about the assault?" Another yelled, "Was the victim your lover's wife?" The questions came like stones. She pushed past them, but the sound of her name followed her down the street. Her lawyer met her in the car. "Damage control starts now," he said. "We'll claim emotional distress. Say you were provoked. We can use your medical history to show temporary panic." Vanessa stared out the window. "You mean lie." "Call it narrative," he replied. "Right now, truth doesn't matter. Perception does." She turned her head, watching the blur of city lights. "They already decided what I am," she said quietly. "No narrative will change that." At a nearby cafe, 2 women scrolled through their phones, whispering. "Look, that's her," one said, showing a picture of Vanessa taken that morning. The other shook her head. "She should be in jail. Poor woman in the hospital. I heard she almost lost her baby." The words carried, drifting through the air like smoke. Vanessa heard them as she passed by. For the first time, she felt the sting of being seen not as admired, but as despised. She walked faster, heart pounding. By evening, the official hospital statement went public. Dr. Matthews' words appeared on every major network. Riverside Medical Center stands for truth, compassion, and accountability. We will cooperate fully with law enforcement to ensure justice for Mrs. Claire Donovan. His voice was measured, but the moral authority behind it was devastating. It left no room for denial. Sponsors withdrew completely. Her modeling agency suspended her contract. The charity gala she was supposed to host next month replaced her with another ambassador. The speed of her erasure was surgical. Within hours, her social life, her career, and her image vanished into digital dust. As the sun sank behind the city skyline, Vanessa returned to her apartment, the once luxurious space now echoing with emptiness. She walked through the living room, stepping over scattered newspapers, the sound of her heels echoing against marble. On the television, a news anchor summarized the day's events. Authorities confirm ongoing investigation. Sources suggest video evidence will play a key role. She stood still, watching herself on screen. The broadcast played her smiling face from a past interview, a clip from a charity event. "I believe kindness changes the world," she had said then. The irony made her stomach twist. The screen switched to a photo of Claire in the hospital, pale but alive. The caption read, "Miracle Mother expected to recover." Vanessa's hand tightened around her glass until it cracked. Wine spilled across her fingers, glinting red in the blue glow of the television. She sank onto the couch, staring at the image of the woman she had tried to destroy, the woman who had somehow survived. Outside, the city lights flickered like distant judgment. Inside, Vanessa sat surrounded by reflections of herself, each one darker than the last. She turned off the TV, but the silence that followed was worse than noise. For the first time in years, she felt truly alone. And somewhere in that silence, a new fear began to grow, the fear that her fall had only just begun. The city felt different that morning. The sky was still gray, but it no longer looked heavy. It looked like a curtain ready to lift. Inside Riverside Medical Center, the air buzzed with quiet purpose. Doctors moved through the hallways as if nothing extraordinary had happened, yet everyone knew something had changed. For the first time in weeks, justice was not just whispered about, it had a direction. Dr. William Matthews sat behind his desk, reviewing a folder filled with signed statements. Witness reports, medical logs, and surveillance images were neatly arranged in chronological order. Across from him sat Eleanor Donovan, Claire's mother, her silver hair tied in a simple bun. Despite her calm appearance, her eyes burned with the determination of a woman who had watched her daughter bleed and survive. "So this is it," Eleanor said, her voice steady. "The evidence that proves everything." Dr. Matthews nodded. "Every testimony matches the footage. There's no room left for denial." He closed the folder carefully. "We're taking this to the district attorney's office today." A knock on the door interrupted them. The nurse from the maternity ward entered, holding another document. "Sir, the security officer who was on duty that night just submitted his statement. He confirms Vanessa Cole was inside the restricted area without authorization." Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. She walked in like she owned the place. She thought no one would ever stop her. Dr. Matthews signed the report. "Now someone will." He looked at the nurse. "Thank you. You may go." When the door closed, he turned toward Eleanor again. "I've already spoken to Janet Morrison, the assistant district attorney. She's willing to take the case. She believes we can secure charges of assault and obstruction of medical procedure." Eleanor's eyes softened with relief. "Claire deserves this. Every woman who's been silenced deserves this." No. Later that morning, the three of them met in a private conference room at the courthouse. Janet Morrison was a sharp, composed woman in her 40s, with eyes that missed nothing. She flipped through the files with quick precision. "You have a solid foundation here," she said. "The video footage will speak for itself, but the eyewitnesses give it undeniable weight." Dr. Matthews leaned forward. "How soon can we proceed?" "Soon," Janet replied, "but we'll need Claire's statement on record. When she's strong enough, I'll come to her directly. I want her to know this case isn't just about punishment, it's about precedent." Eleanor glanced up. "What do you mean?" Janet smiled faintly. "This case could help change how assaults on pregnant women are prosecuted in the state. We've been pushing for reforms for years. Claire's case might be the spark we need." For a long moment, the room fell silent. The weight of that possibility settled between them like a quiet promise. Across town, Ethan Hale sat inside his office, surrounded by lawyers. His empire was shrinking fast. Half of his investors had withdrawn, and the board was demanding answers. Every attempt to fix his image made things worse. Vanessa had vanished from the public eye, and no one believed his claims of ignorance anymore. A junior lawyer slid a document toward him. "You've been subpoenaed, sir. You'll need to testify." Ethan looked up sharply. "Testify about what?" "About the night of the incident," the lawyer said. "Dr. Matthews filed formal charges. There's an official criminal case now." He sank into his chair, feeling the cold truth settle into his bones. The woman he once dismissed as fragile now stood behind an entire institution, and the world was listening to her side of the story. The next day, the courthouse steps overflowed with reporters. Cameras clicked, microphones extended, and headlines shouted across the morning air. Hospital assault case reaches court. Director confirms niece's testimony. Public calls for accountability. Inside, the tension was electric. Dr. Matthews and Eleanor sat side by side at the front row, watching as the preliminary hearing began. Claire, still recovering, was not yet present, but her written testimony had been submitted to the judge. The prosecution outlined the evidence with calm authority. When the video footage played, the courtroom fell silent. The faint audio of Claire's cry echoed against the marble walls. Vanessa sat at the defendant's table, her face pale under the harsh lights. She wore a black suit, her usual confidence replaced by defiance, thinly veiled as composure. Her lawyer objected repeatedly, but the objections only highlighted the weight of the evidence. Ethan sat behind her, summoned as a witness. His jaw clenched as he watched the screen. He had convinced himself that silence could protect him, that neutrality would keep his hands clean. But as the footage played, neutrality turned into guilt, captured forever in his stillness. When the hearing ended, the crowd outside erupted into noise. Protesters held signs demanding justice. Cameras followed every movement, every reaction. For the first time, the story no longer belonged to rumor, it belonged to truth. Eleanor stepped out of the courthouse with quiet dignity, shielding her face from the flashes. Reporters shouted questions. "Mrs. Donovan, how is your daughter? Do you believe justice will be served?" She paused, looking directly at the cameras. "My daughter survived something no woman should endure. Justice isn't a belief, it's a necessity." Her voice carried strength that silenced even the most persistent reporter. Across the plaza, Ethan exited through a side door, escorted by his lawyer. A group of onlookers recognized him immediately. Someone shouted his name. Another called him a coward. He kept his head down, his polished shoes splashing through puddles as if each step carried shame instead of power. From the car parked across the street, Dr. Matthews watched the scene unfold. Eleanor sat beside him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Through the windshield, they could see the chaos that once belonged entirely to Ethan and Vanessa. Now it belonged to the truth. "Do you think he'll ever admit what he did?" Eleanor asked quietly. Dr. Matthews shook his head. "He doesn't have to. The world already has." She looked out the window, her voice softer. "Claire will want to see this someday, to know what her pain changed." He nodded slowly. "She'll see it. She'll see everything." Rain began to fall again, gentle and clean this time, washing over the courthouse steps like a benediction. The storm had not ended, but its purpose had shifted. For the first time, the power belonged to the ones who had been hurt, not the ones who had caused it. And as the cameras turned toward the courthouse doors once more, a new chapter was already waiting inside, one that would carry the name Claire Donovan into history. The courthouse stood beneath a pale winter sky, its marble steps crowded with reporters, cameras, and protest signs. People lined the street, holding umbrellas and banners that read "Justice for Claire." The sound of voices blended with the low hum of live broadcasts. Inside, the air was thick with expectation. For weeks, the city had followed every headline. Now, the truth would be spoken where everyone could hear it. Claire Donovan entered the courtroom slowly, her steps measured but steady. She wore a light sky-blue dress that fell softly around her knees. The color was gentle, but it carried meaning. It was the same shade she had worn the day she nearly lost everything. When she reached her seat beside Dr. Matthews, the clicking of cameras filled the room. He gave her a reassuring nod, his hand resting briefly on hers before the session began. Judge Patricia Hernandez presided with calm authority. Her voice carried easily across the packed chamber. "This court is now in session. The case of the state versus Vanessa Cole." The murmurs died instantly. Assistant District Attorney Janet Morrison rose first. Her presence commanded attention. "Your Honor," she began, "this case is not about wealth, image, or influence. It is about violence. It is about a woman who believed she could harm another and walk away untouched." She walked toward the jury box, holding a single sheet of paper. "The evidence will show that Vanessa Cole entered a restricted hospital ward, confronted Mrs. Claire Donovan Hale, and intentionally caused bodily harm to both her and her unborn child." Every word landed like a strike against the quiet. On the opposite side, Vanessa sat beside her lawyer, her expression unreadable. She wore a black suit, her hair tied tightly back. but the confidence that once defined her had vanished. Her attorney adjusted his glasses and whispered something in her ear, but she didn't respond. When the prosecution presented the hospital footage, the courtroom became utterly silent. The grainy video played on the large screen. Vanessa stepping forward, Claire falling. The sound of a cry filled the room. Some jurors looked away. Others clenched their jaws. Janet spoke again. "What you just saw is not an accident. It is an act of cruelty, and it nearly cost 2 lives. You come." The defense objected, but the judge overruled. Later, Claire took the stand. The room held its breath as she was sworn in. Her voice trembled at first, but the strength in her eyes anchored every word. "That day, I was there for a routine checkup. I never imagined it would end in blood. She looked at me with hate I can't explain. I begged her to stop. Her throat tightened. When she kicked me, I thought I was losing my child. I remember falling, hearing the machine crash, and feeling everything go quiet inside me." She paused, her hand instinctively resting on her belly. "I wasn't just fighting for my life. I was fighting for my child's right to be born in a world where cruelty isn't power." The courtroom stayed silent for several seconds after she spoke. Even the clicking of cameras stopped. Then the judge nodded gently. "You may step down, Mrs. Donovan." Dr. Matthews looked at his niece with quiet pride. He had seen hundreds of testimonies in his career, but none like this. It was not law that gave her power that morning. It was truth. By afternoon, every news outlet in the country carried her words. Television anchors repeated them. Talk shows debated them. Hashtags spread across social media. Number Justice for Claire and number The Claire Case. The story reached beyond the courtroom. It became a symbol. When Vanessa's lawyer tried to argue that his client acted out of fear, Janet Morrison's voice cut through the chamber. "Fear does not excuse cruelty," she said. "It exposes it." The defense faltered. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears, not from guilt, but from losing the control she had clung to for so long. Outside the courthouse, crowds chanted for change. Protesters held signs that read, "Protect mothers, protect lives." Inside the prosecutor's office, Janet and Dr. Matthews worked late into the night. He spread out legal documents across the table. "We can't let this stop here," he said. "This case can set a precedent." Janet nodded. "We've been pushing for stronger laws to protect pregnant women from assault. Now we have the story, the evidence, and the public will." They drafted the proposal together, line by line. The Claire Act. It called for harsher penalties against those who harmed expectant mothers and for emergency protections in hospitals nationwide. It was written not just for Claire, but for every woman who might face what she had. When the bill reached the state legislature a week later, it passed unanimously through committee. Lawmakers quoted Claire's testimony on the floor. One senator said, "Her courage gave this law a voice." Back at the hospital, Claire watched the live broadcast from her recovery room. The screen showed the chamber filled with applause as the bill advanced. She pressed a hand to her chest, overwhelmed. Dr. Matthews stood behind her, a quiet smile softening his usually stern face. "This is your voice echoing beyond what they tried to silence," he said gently. Claire turned to him, her eyes shining. "I didn't think anyone would listen." "They listened," he said. "And now they'll remember." "No?" The evening sky outside turned shades of gold and rose, the city bathed in light. Reporters called the moment the Claire Act victory. Her name, once tied to pain, now carried a meaning larger than herself. But even as celebration spread, the trial was not over. The verdict would come next week. The nation waited for it, hearts divided between outrage and hope. That night, Claire stood by the window of her hospital room, watching the city's lights flicker below. She touched her belly gently, feeling the faint movement of life. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "justice won't just be an idea. It will have a name." Outside, the courthouse clock struck 9, each chime echoing through the cold night air, counting down to the morning when the world would finally hear the verdict. The courthouse was silent when the verdict came. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Rain tapped gently against the tall windows, soft enough to sound like a heartbeat. Claire sat between Dr. Matthews and her mother, Eleanor, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The entire nation was watching. Every network carried the broadcast live. After weeks of testimony, tears, and headlines, everything came down to this moment. Judge Hernandez adjusted her glasses and looked at the jury. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreperson stood, paper trembling in his hands. We have, Your Honor. He handed the document to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. A pause filled the room, brief but unbearable. In the case of the State versus Vanessa Cole, the judge read, we find the defendant guilty on all counts: aggravated assault, intentional harm, and obstruction of medical procedure. A sound escaped the crowd, a mix of gasps and quiet sobs. Claire closed her eyes as tears welled up. For the first time in months, she felt the weight inside her chest lift, replaced by something that felt like breath, like release. The judge continued, given the severity of the crime and its impact, this court sentences the defendant to 8 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for the first 5. Restitution and community service will follow upon release. Vanessa sat frozen, her face pale. The camera lights captured every flicker of disbelief that crossed her features. Her lawyer whispered something in her ear, but she didn't respond. For years, she had controlled the narrative with charm and manipulation. Now the story had slipped entirely from her hands. Judge Hernandez turned to Ethan Hale. Mr. Hale, as a witness and former spouse, this court finds your behavior negligent, morally reprehensible, though not criminal. However, your silence contributed to the harm done. The civil proceedings against you will continue under separate jurisdiction. Ethan lowered his head. His once impeccable composure was gone. Outside the courthouse, protesters chanted his name alongside hers, demanding accountability. The empire he had built on reputation and charm had crumbled into dust. The judge's final words echoed through the chamber. This case has reminded us that justice is not for the powerful, but for the truthful. Court is adjourned. The gavel struck once. The sound cut through the silence like thunder breaking a long night. Reporters surged forward as security escorted Vanessa out. Cameras flashed. She shielded her face, but there was no escaping the glare. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, each step echoing like a countdown to oblivion. Outside, rain mixed with the light of flashbulbs, blurring her silhouette into something ghostly. Ethan followed moments later, his lawyer beside him, his head lowered. He ignored the shouts and the microphones. The crowd's anger was louder than any question. "You let it happen!" someone yelled. "She could have died!" He didn't respond. The sound of his silence had already become his confession. Inside the courtroom, Claire remained seated. The reporters had moved on, the chaos fading to murmurs. Dr. Matthews reached for her hand. "It's over," he said softly. She shook her head, tears streaming freely now. "No, it's beginning," he smiled faintly. "Then let this beginning be yours." Eleanor stood beside them, her eyes glistening. "You did it, sweetheart. You turned pain into something greater." As they walked out together, the crowd outside parted like water around a stone. Cameras turned, not on the guilty, but on her. For once, the attention didn't feel invasive. It felt earned. Reporters shouted questions. "Mrs. Donovan, how do you feel?" Claire paused, her voice steady. "Grateful," she said, "for life, for truth, for every woman who stood with me, even when I couldn't stand for myself." Her words traveled far beyond the courthouse steps. They aired across the country within minutes, replayed on news loops, quoted in headlines. Grateful for life, for truth. The phrase became a symbol of grace and victory. 2 weeks later, the world shifted again. The hospital room smelled faintly of flowers and rain. Claire lay on the bed, her face pale but radiant. Machines beeped softly around her, steady and calm. Dr. Matthews stood beside her, holding her hand as he had on the night she almost lost everything. "You did well," he said quietly. "Both of you." The nurse smiled as she placed the small bundle into Claire's arms. The baby stirred, a faint whimper breaking the silence. Claire looked down at her daughter's face, pink, tiny, perfect, and the tears she had held back for so long finally fell. "She made it," Claire whispered. "She really made it." Eleanor entered quietly, her voice trembling with emotion. "What will you name her?" Claire smiled through her tears. "Grace," she said. "Because after everything, that's what's left." The room filled with gentle laughter and the sound of a newborn breathing. Outside, the sky cleared for the first time in days. Sunlight poured through the hospital window, warming Claire's face, and the child resting against her chest. "Doctor," Matthews looked at them, pride softening the lines of his face. "Your story will change lives, Claire. It already has." She glanced up at him. "It wasn't just mine, it was ours. You, Mom, Janet, everyone who refused to stay silent." He nodded, emotion caught in his throat. "Then promise me something. When the world asks you what justice felt like, tell them it sounded like her heartbeat." Claire looked down at the baby again, her tiny fingers curling around her own. "I will," she said. "I'll tell her everything." For a long time, no one spoke. The room was filled only with light, quiet, and the faint rhythm of life reborn. Outside, reporters waited, unaware of the miracle unfolding behind the glass. Inside, the woman who had once been broken by cruelty now held in her arms the purest proof that love could survive anything. Claire kissed the top of her daughter's head. "Welcome home, Grace," she whispered. "You're the reason the world still believes in mercy." Oh. Through the window, sunlight struck the hospital's nameplate, where a new plaque had been added that morning, dedicated to survivors of violence and to the power of truth. The light reflected across the walls, bright and endless. Tomorrow, the story would move beyond headlines and courts. It would belong to every woman who refused to be silenced. A year passed, and the world had changed. The city that once whispered about tragedy now spoke of renewal. Outside Riverside Medical Center, the morning air was crisp, touched with the scent of rain. The bronze plaque by the entrance caught the light of the rising sun, the Claire Donovan Healing Wing, dedicated to the strength of survivors. Inside the lobby, the rhythm of the hospital felt different. It no longer carried the echo of panic and fear. It pulsed with life, calm and steady. Nurses greeted Claire as she walked down the corridor, her light blue dress swaying softly with each step. A small girl toddled beside her, clutching her hand, her laughter bouncing off the white walls. Grace had her mother's eyes, deep and steady, and her father's faint dimple when she smiled. The sight of her brought smiles from everyone they passed. Claire carried a folder under her arm labeled Patient Advocacy Program. She now worked as a consultant, helping women who faced trauma and recovery, guiding them through the very halls where she once fought for her life. When she reached the new conference room, Dr. Matthews was already waiting. His hair had grown a little grayer, but his energy remained sharp. "You're early," he said with a smile. "I had help," she replied, glancing down at Grace, who was busy playing with a stethoscope someone had dropped. He chuckled. "Looks like we've found our next doctor." Grace looked up at him and giggled. "Uncle Will," she said, the words bright and clear. He bent down to pick her up, his face softening completely. "You have no idea how much light you bring, little one." Claire smiled, watching them. "She doesn't just bring light," she said. "She reminds me what it means to stay alive." They sat together in the meeting room, reviewing plans for the hospital's new outreach program. The initiative, funded by grants and private donations, would provide legal and psychological aid to women affected by domestic or medical abuse. Dr. Matthews leaned back, folding his glasses. "We've already received requests from other hospitals. They want to model their programs after ours. You've started something that will outlast all of us." Claire looked out the window, where the sun climbed higher over the skyline. "It wasn't just me. It was you, Mom, Janet, everyone who refused to let it end with a verdict." He nodded, pride glimmering behind the exhaustion of endless work. "Still, it took courage to walk back into this building. Most people would have run from it forever." She smiled faintly. "Maybe I needed to come back to prove it no longer controls me." A soft knock came at the door. Eleanor entered, holding a bouquet of white lilies. "You two have turned this place into a symbol," she said warmly. "It's strange, walking into this hospital and feeling peace instead of fear." Claire stood to hug her mother. "You were the first one who believed this wasn't the end," she said. "You were right." Eleanor brushed her daughter's hair gently. "It's not about being right, sweetheart. It's about remembering that healing doesn't erase scars. It just teaches us how to live with them." Later that afternoon, they held a small ceremony to dedicate the new wing. Reporters attended, but this time there were no flashing lights, no chaos, only quiet applause as Dr. Matthews introduced Claire to the podium. She took a deep breath, the baby blue fabric of her dress glowing softly in the sunlight streaming through the tall windows. "When I first came here," she began, "I was terrified. I didn't think I would ever walk again, or speak again, or believe again. But this place gave me back my life. Not just because of medicine, but because of compassion. Today, we dedicate this wing to every person who thought they were broken beyond repair. You're not. You never were." Her voice trembled slightly, but she didn't stop. "My daughter was born in this hospital. Her name is Grace, because that's what saved me. Grace isn't perfection. It's survival with kindness still intact." Applause filled the room, gentle but heartfelt. Dr. Matthews wiped at his glasses discreetly. Eleanor smiled through tears. After the ceremony, Claire walked alone down the hallway toward the maternity ward. Each step echoed against the tile like memory turned solid. She paused at the door of the room where it had all begun. The same number still hung there, room 7. She stepped inside quietly. The walls had been repainted, the machines replaced, but the energy of the space lingered. She ran her hand along the edge of the bed, remembering the sound of monitors, the smell of disinfectant, the taste of fear. Grace peeked in behind her, curiosity lighting her face. "Mama, what's this room?" Claire knelt, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. "It's where you and I learned how strong love can be," she said softly. Grace smiled, small fingers curling around her mother's hand. "Can we go home now?" "Yes, sweetheart," Claire said. "We can go home." As they walked out, sunlight spilled across the floor. Claire paused for a moment, glancing back. She placed a small bouquet of light blue flowers on the windowsill, her quiet tradition. "For the ones who couldn't make it," she whispered. Outside, the air shimmered with the warmth of spring. The city seemed calmer now, its rhythm slower, wiser. The Claire Act had been officially enacted 6 months ago, transforming policy into protection. Every time a new hospital adopted the reform, a letter arrived for Claire, signed simply, "In your name, with gratitude." That night, back at home, Claire tucked Grace into bed. The child's soft breathing filled the room. Claire sat beside her, tracing gentle circles on her tiny hand. "You'll grow up in a world that's kinder," she whispered. "That's my promise to you." She rose, walked to the window, and opened the curtains. Outside, dawn was already rising again. Endless, golden, forgiving. Claire closed her eyes, letting the light touch her face. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang, steady and pure. The world kept moving forward, carrying her story not as tragedy, but as proof of endurance. She smiled, whispering to herself, "We survived, and that's enough." Behind her, the baby monitor glowed softly. In its quiet rhythm, she could almost hear a heartbeat that once faltered but never stopped. The sound of life, of justice, of hope reborn.
Scream all you want. Die with your baby for all I care. The words, sharp as shattered glass, cut through Evelyn Kirby's agony. A contraction seized her body, forcing a strangled cry. She clutched the mahogany doorframe of their Beacon Hill brownstone, her knuckles white. "Charles, please, it's time. The hospital." Her husband, Charles Burden, adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke suit. He didn't look concerned. He looked annoyed. "Take your pain and your screaming with you," he spat, his voice devoid of all warmth. "You'll never ruin my life again." He yanked the door open and shoved her. Not hard, but with chilling finality. Evelyn stumbled onto the cold Boston sidewalk, the door slamming shut, its echo swallowed by the night, and her own rising scream. The November wind whipped off the Charles River, slicing through Evelyn's thin silk robe. Sweat and sudden, icy rain plastered it to her skin. She was 9 months pregnant, and she had just been thrown out of her home by her husband while in labor. Another contraction ripped through her, a white-hot poker stabbing her lower back. She doubled over, bracing herself against the wrought-iron fence. "God, please! Somebody!" Across the cobblestone street, a porch light flicked on. Mrs. Petroff, their elderly neighbor, peeked through her curtains, her face a mask of curious alarm. "Evelyn, dear, is everything all right?" Her voice quavered across the empty street. Evelyn forced herself upright, pushing the words past the lump of humiliation in her throat. I'm in labor. I need a ride. Please, Charles, won't—" Her voice broke. Mrs. Petrov hesitated. Evelyn could see the calculation in her eyes, the desire to help versus the desire not to get involved in the burden's very public, very messy drama. The rumors about Charles and his new associate had been the talk of Beacon Hill for months. Oh dear, that's— Well, the older woman clutched her robe. It's so late. I can call you a cab, dear. That would be fastest, wouldn't it? The rejection was a small, cold stone added to the mountain of pain. Thank you, Evelyn whispered, tasting bile. Mrs. Petrov vanished behind her door. Time warped. Contractions came closer, blurring into a relentless tide of agony. Each one felt like her body was being torn in two. She was an animal in the street, exposed and terrified. She sank to the cold granite steps, biting the inside of her cheek to keep from screaming, tasting blood. The man she had loved, the man who had vowed to protect her, had left her here to die. Finally, the yellow headlights of a taxi appeared. The driver, a man in his late 50s with a kind, weary face, took one look at her and leaped out. Ma'am? Oh, Lord, you're— Okay, let's go. Hospital, right? He didn't wait for an answer, gently helping her into the back seat, his hands surprisingly gentle. Mount Auburn? Mass General. Mass General, she gasped, climbing in slowly. Please, fast! The cab pulled away from the curb, and Evelyn stared at the reflection of her home in the window. The lights were on. He was in there, probably pouring a scotch, probably calling her. Sienna. The driver glanced in the rearview mirror. His name tag read, Mike. You want me to call your husband? Tell him we're on the way. Evelyn pressed her forehead to the cool, vibrating window and tried not to cry. She failed. Tears ran hot streaks through the grime and sweat on her face. No, she choked out. Mike's eyes softened with a pity that hurt more than indifference. He just nodded and focused on the road, hitting the gas. The city at night looked alien, like a world she no longer belonged to. Stores were closed, streetlights blurred. Somewhere, someone laughed. Evelyn dug her nails into the vinyl seat, breathing through the next wave, just as the nurse in the birthing class had taught her. Breathe in the calm, breathe out the pain. But there was no calm. There was only betrayal. At the hospital's emergency entrance, Mike helped her out. You're gonna be okay, he said softly, pressing a crumpled receipt into her hand. It's on me. You're here now. The automatic doors slid open with a pneumatic sigh. The waiting room was fluorescent and smelled of bleach and old coffee. A triage nurse, her face etched with the exhaustion of a 12-hour shift, looked up, saw Evelyn, and stood in one fluid motion. How far apart? The nurse asked, her voice all business, steering Evelyn into a wheelchair with practiced efficiency. 3 minutes, maybe 2. I can't tell, it hurts. First baby? Yes. The nurse scanned the empty doorway behind them. Any support person? Husband on his way? The question hung in the sterile air. Evelyn shook her head, the humiliation burning fresh. Just me. The nurse's eyes warmed for just a second. Okay, just me. I'm Hannah. I've got you, she said. Let's go have this baby. They strapped monitors to her belly. The rapid, galloping thump-thump-thump of her baby's heartbeat filled the small room. It was the only other heartbeat in the world that mattered. Evelyn closed her eyes and let it anchor her. You're brave, Hannah said, checking a reading. You're doing good. Brave. It felt like a lie. Brave was a word for people who had a choice. Evelyn was just surviving. Hours blurred. Pain rose and fell. Nurses changed shifts. A doctor with soft hands and a tired smile introduced herself. Memories broke through the haze, rude and sharp. Charles's laugh when he used to make her tea. his hands on her shoulders the day he promised forever. When had it tilted? When had love become this weapon he used to destroy her? Her phone, sitting on the plastic tray, buzzed. She glanced at it. A text from a number she didn't recognize. "He's with me now. Focus on your little project." S. Another contraction slammed through her, stealing her breath. She squeezed the metal bed rail, a raw, wounded sound tearing from her throat. The nurse, a new one, touched her shoulder. "Don't read anything tonight, honey," she said softly. "Let it wait." Evelyn nodded, tears running clean tracks down her face. She was in a room full of strangers, bringing a life into a world that had just been shattered. She had never felt so utterly, terrifyingly alone. In another part of the city, Charles Burden poured 2 glasses of Macallan 25. The fire crackled in the marble fireplace of his living room. Sienna, wrapped in one of his cashmere blankets, took the glass. "Is she gone?" Sienna asked, her voice a low purr. "Finally," Charles said, loosening his tie. "She'll be fine. She's dramatic. Always has been." "You pushed your pregnant wife out while she was in labor, Charles." Sienna swirled the amber liquid. "That's not dramatic. That's intense." "She's not my wife," he snapped, the word sounding like an accusation. "Not anymore. She's a liability. You've seen her. The last year has been a circus. Mood swings, tears, accusations. My investors are asking questions. My board is nervous. A man in my position needs stability. He needs you." Sienna sipped, watching him over the rim. "And what about the baby?" "The baby," he sighed, "is a complication. A leash she's been trying to chain me with for months. It's not happening. So what now?" Charles moved close, kissing her, his kiss a proof of ownership. "Now we handle it. I've already spoken to her mother." Sienna's eyebrows shot up. "Her mother? I thought they weren't speaking." "Eleanor understands stability. She understands the importance of the Burden name. She'll tell everyone Evelyn had a breakdown, that she was unstable. It's not a hard sell. People remember her crying at the grocery store last month because they were out of that specific brand of imported olives. They remember." Sienna laughed, a low, throaty sound. "Poor Evelyn, no olives." "Poor me," Charles corrected. "No peace, until now. Back at Mass General, the hours turned liquid. Evelyn's world narrowed to the rhythm of her own breathing and the nurse's steady voice. She pushed like she was pushing out every lie, every shove, every slammed door. And then a cry that split the air, high and fierce. Evelyn fell back, breath ripped from her lungs. The doctor lifted a small, wet, furious human and laid her on Evelyn's chest. "Hi," Evelyn sobbed, laughter and grief tangled in the word. "Hi, baby. Hi." The baby opened her mouth and protested life. Evelyn ran a finger along the damp cheek and felt something in her own chest crack open and pour out like light. "What's her name?" the nurse asked, smiling. Evelyn swallowed. She said the name she had loved since she was a girl, the name she and Charles had never discussed. "Lily. Her name is Lily." A few hours later, while Lily slept in the bassinet, the door opened. Evelyn expected a nurse. It was her mother. Eleanor Kirby stood in the doorway, clutching her Louis Vuitton purse like a shield. Her perfume was too strong for the room. "Evelyn," she said, her tone as flat as a table. "You look exhausted." "I just had a baby, Mum." Eleanor sat on the edge of the visitor's chair, as if it might stain her coat. "I heard. Charles called me. He's worried sick." Evelyn flinched. The lie was so blatant it physically hurt. "He threw me out while I was in labor. He told me to die." Eleanor's mouth tightened. "Evelyn, you dramatize. He said you were screaming, throwing things. You frighten people with your emotions. You always have. I was in labor. We need to talk about what's best for the baby, Eleanor said, glancing at the sleeping child with a clinical detachment. Charles is stable. He has a home, a good job. You're here, in a hospital, alone. You don't even have a plan. He's had his lawyers draw up some papers. She placed a manila folder on the tray table. Temporary guardianship, just until you're settled. You can still visit, of course. Evelyn stared at her mother, at the woman whose approval she had chased her entire life. The woman who had always told her she was too sensitive, too loud, too much. She saw it now. Her mother wasn't concerned. She was embarrassed by the mess, by the drama, by the daughter who refused to be quiet and perfect. You're taking his side, Evelyn whispered. I'm taking the baby's side, Eleanor snapped. Look at you. You can't even take care of yourself. You need help. Evelyn's lips trembled. She looked at Lily. So small, so perfect. A fierce, primal coldness washed through her. It wasn't bravery, it was certainty. Please leave, Evelyn said, her voice quiet. Eleanor blinked, offended. Excuse me? Get out! Evelyn's voice was steadier now, sharp with a new, cold anger. You don't get to sit here and call me unstable while I'm holding my daughter. You don't get to choose him over me. Not tonight. Not ever again. Eleanor stood, clutching her purse. You always push away the people who try to help you, Evelyn. Don't call me when you can't pay your rent. I won't, Evelyn said. Her mother left, the click of her heels echoing down the hall. The door closed. Evelyn looked down at Lily and made a promise. It's just us now, baby girl, she whispered, her tears falling hot and fast onto the pink blanket. But I swear, I will never, ever let them hurt you. Evelyn was discharged 2 days later. A social worker, her eyes kind but professional, had given her a list of shelters and WIC program pamphlets. Evelyn had thanked her and taken the bus to a one-room, weekly rate apartment in Dorchester she'd found on Craigslist. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and mildew. The walls were thin, the radiator hissed, and the window overlooked a dumpster. It was a universe away from the heated marble floors and river views of Beacon Hill. Evelyn placed Lily's borrowed bassinet by the bed. She had $24 and a newborn. Her mother's words echoed in her ears. Don't call me when you can't pay rent. She sank onto the lumpy mattress, her body aching, the stitches from her delivery pulling. Despair was a physical weight, pressing her down. She was exactly what they said she was. Alone, unstable, a failure. She wept, silent, body-racking sobs. Terrified she would wake the baby. After an hour, she had no tears left. She felt hollowed out. She stood and shuffled to the small closet where the single suitcase Charles had thrown out after her sat. He hadn't just thrown her out. He'd packed a bag for her. The clinical cruelty of it was breathtaking. Inside, under the few changes of clothes he'd deemed hers, was a small, scarred wooden chest. It was the only thing she owned that had been her father's. Her father, David Kirby, had been the black sheep of her mother's wealthy family. He was a poet and a history professor, a kind, quiet man who saw the world in shades of color while her mother only saw black and white, asset and liability. He had died of a heart attack when Evelyn was 19, leaving her alone with Eleanor. Her fingers traced the familiar carving on the lid. She opened it. Inside, beneath a few old photos and his favorite fountain pen, were 2 letters. One was addressed to her. My dearest Evie, if you are reading this, life has taken a hard turn. Remember who you are. You are not your mother's expectations. You are my daughter. You have a fire in you. Don't let anyone put it out. Not even her. The second envelope was thicker, addressed to her from a law firm, Hawthorne, Gray and Associates. She'd received it after his death, but, at Eleanor's insistence, had never opened it. "It's just old debts, dear," Eleanor had said, waving it away. "Let me handle it." Now, Evelyn's fingers trembled as she broke the seal. Inside was a multi-page trust document. She read it once, then twice, her vision blurred. Her father, the impractical poet, had come from old, quiet money himself. Money he'd hidden from her mother. He had left everything to Evelyn in an ironclad trust, managed by his oldest friend, Arthur Hawthorne. The trust was locked until her 30th birthday, or, the document read, in the event of dire personal need, including, but not limited to, abandonment or divorce. At the bottom of the summary page was a number, $20 million. Evelyn's breath stopped. She stared at the paper, at the zeros. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. She dropped the papers, her hands shaking so violently she scared the baby. Lily let out a small cry. Evelyn rushed to pick her up, holding her close. "Shh, shh, it's okay. Mommy's here." She looked back at the document. $20 million. She could walk back to Beacon Hill right now. She could buy the brownstone next to Charles's. She could hire the best lawyers in Boston and take him for everything. A cold, clear thought cut through the fog of her pain. No, if she showed her hand now, Charles would fight. He would use her mother, the media, the courts. He would paint her as hysterical, a gold digger. He would drag her through a custody battle that would destroy her and scar Lily. He had called her dramatic, unstable, weak. "Let him think I am," she thought, a shard of ice forming in her gut. "Let them all think I'm broken. Let them forget about me." She looked at her father's letter. "You have a fire in you." Yes, she did. But she wouldn't use it to burn brightly. Not yet. She would use it to forge. Evelyn carefully folded the trust documents and the letter. She slid them back into the wooden chest and pushed it deep under the sagging bed. She looked around the tiny, grim apartment. This wasn't her prison. This was her camouflage. "Not yet, Lily," she whispered, kissing her daughter's forehead. "They'll never see us coming. She would survive. She would work. She would raise her daughter. And she would wait. Because revenge, she realized, wasn't a fire. It was a stone. You just had to wait for the perfect moment to throw it. The next year was a grinding education in humility. Evelyn Kirby, who had once chaired fundraisers at the MFA, learned to scrub toilets. She found a job cleaning houses in Back Bay, taking the tea at 5 in the morning, Lily bundled against her chest in a second-hand carrier. She'd clean for 4 hours, her body screaming, her hands raw from bleach, all while Lily slept in her carrier in a quiet corner. In the afternoons, she'd return to the Dorchester apartment, which she now shared with 2 other single mothers, splitting the rent 3 ways. At night, she took a waitressing shift at a 24-hour diner, the full plate, where the tips were poor and the smell of old grease clung to her hair. Her co-workers, Maria and Jen, were tough, kind, and asked no questions. They'd take turns rocking Lily in the back office when she got fussy. Evelyn was exhausted. She was a ghost, haunting the edges of a life she used to know. The hunger was constant, a dull ache she ignored so Lily could have formula. The humiliation, however, was worse than the hunger. One afternoon, cleaning a pristine Commonwealth Avenue penthouse, the homeowner, a woman she'd once served on a gala committee with, opened the door. "Oh yes, the new girl," the woman, Mrs. Vanderbilt, said, not even looking at her. "Don't use too much water on the Brazilian cherry. It leaves streaks. And my phone is—" She paused, finally recognizing the face under the baseball cap. Evelyn Burden?" Evelyn's face burned. "It's Evelyn Kirby now. Hello, Amanda." Amanda's eyes widened, her gaze flickering over Evelyn's worn jeans and the cleaning caddy. "My God," she whispered, a delicious, horrified pity in her voice. We all heard, of course. Charles, unstable. But this? Oh, you poor, poor thing. Evelyn just gripped the mop handle. Where would you like me to start? Oh no, you can't. I mean... Amanda was flustered, not by compassion, but by the social awkwardness. I'll pay you for the day, of course. But this is just... too sad. Evelyn was dismissed, her charity for the day pocketed, the door closing softly in her face. At the diner, it was no better. One evening, 2 women she recognized from her old yoga studio slid into a booth. "Is that?" one whispered, loud enough to hear. "Yes, look at her. Waiting tables. Mark. Oh, Charles. Really upgraded, didn't he? That Sienna is stunning. Did you see their wedding photos? In Vogue?" "She looks bitter," the other said, as Evelyn walked away, her back rigid. Pathetic. Evelyn gripped the counter until her knuckles whitened. Pathetic. The word followed her everywhere. Meanwhile, Charles and Sienna lived like royalty. Their wedding was the talk of the city. He had officially rebranded his company from Burden Financial to Burden Global, expanding into risky, flashy tech ventures. Sienna was his perfect accessory, her Instagram a curated fantasy of their life. Private jets to Nantucket, front row at Fashion Week, charity balls where she wore gowns Evelyn had once dreamed of. Finally found the peace I deserve. Charles posted under a photo of them in St. Bart's. The home we built together. Sienna captioned a shot from inside the Beacon Hill brownstone. Evelyn's home, with Evelyn's roses in the garden. The comments were a chorus of support. "So glad you're free, Charles. She's so much happier than Evelyn ever was. He deserves peace after what that crazy woman put him through." The lies travelled faster than she could run. Even her mother, Eleanor, repeated them. Evelyn tried calling once, desperate, when Lily had a fever, and she couldn't afford the antibiotics. "Mom, please, I just need a little help." "Evelyn, I can't keep rescuing you." Eleanor's voice was cold. "Mark, Charles, told me how unstable you've been. You're scaring people. Maybe if you had been calmer, tried harder." The call ended. Evelyn sat in the dark apartment, Lily whimpering in her arms, and felt a final, brittle piece of her heart break. The love she'd had for her mother was gone, replaced by a cold, hard vacuum. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was enduring. She kept the newspaper clippings, every smug photo of Charles, every interview where Sienna talked about their destined love. She kept the text messages from her mother. She pasted them inside a spiral notebook, a catalogue of her humiliation. On the long bus rides, she didn't just stare out the window. She read. She studied the Wall Street Journal and The Economist, articles downloaded to her cheap phone. She learned words like leveraged buyout, holding company, and proxy battle. The girl who loved poetry was gone. The woman who scrubbed floors was a disguise. The person growing underneath was someone else, entirely. She was quiet. She was watching, and she was learning. Every whisper of pathetic was just fuel. Her struggle was temporary. Her strength was hardening. And one day soon, the same people who mocked her would choke on their laughter. When Lily turned 1, Evelyn walked into the lobby of a glass skyscraper in the financial district. She wore her best, and only, clean blouse and a pair of slacks from Goodwill. She felt impossibly small. The receptionist at Hawthorne, Gray & Associates, looked her up and down. "Can I help you? I have an appointment with Mr. Hawthorne, Evelyn Kirby." The receptionist's practiced smile didn't waver, but her eyes flickered. "Of course. He's expecting you." The office was quiet, lined with dark wood and old books. It smelled of leather and polish. Arthur Hawthorne stood as she entered. He was tall, in his late 60s, with her father's kind eyes and a sharp, tailored suit. "Evelyn," he said, his voice warm, shaking her hand. "You look just like your father." Evelyn felt an absurd urge to cry. It had been a year since anyone had spoken her name with simple kindness. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Hawthorne. I'm sorry I waited so long." "You came exactly when you were ready," he said, guiding her to a chair. "I've been managing your father's trust for you. It is, as you know, substantial and entirely yours." I don't want to just take it," Evelyn said, the words coming out in a rush. "I don't want to just run away. Charles, he and my mother, they told the world I was unstable. They said I was nothing. If I just show up with money, they'll say I stole it. They'll say I'm unfit. They'll try to take Lily." Arthur listened, his hand steepled. He wasn't just a lawyer, he was a strategist. "Your father," Arthur said slowly, "was not just a poet. He was one of the shrewdest men I ever knew. He built this trust for you, not as a cushion, but as a shield. And, if necessary, a sword." He leaned forward. "I've been following Burden Global, as per your father's suggestions. Charles Burden is a peacock, all feathers, no meat. He's expanded too fast, funded by debt. He's leveraged to the hilt. He's arrogant, and his investors are getting nervous." Evelyn's heart beat faster. "What does that mean?" "It means," Arthur smiled, a thin, sharp smile, "that he's vulnerable. His stock is flagging. He thinks his name will protect him. He's wrong." "I want to buy his company," Evelyn said. The words hung in the air. She had practiced them on the bus, but saying them aloud in this office made them real. Arthur Hawthorne didn't laugh. He didn't tell her she was crazy. He studied her, the same way her father used to. "That's a very big sword, Evelyn. He told me to die with my baby," she said, her voice low and cold. "He built his new life on the lie that I was worthless. I don't want to take his money, Mr. Hawthorne. I want to take his name. I want to take the one thing he loves." A long silence filled the room. Finally, Arthur nodded. "Your father would be incredibly proud." He stood and walked to a whiteboard. "Then we don't do it quickly. We don't do it loudly. We do it slowly. We'll set up a series of holding companies. Shells. Anonymous, untraceable. We'll buy shares quietly, block by block. We'll use your trust, but it will never be traced back to you. Not until you're ready." "How long?" Evelyn asked. "Charles is arrogant. He won't notice until it's too late. He's looking for a wolf at the door, not a termite in the foundation. We'll give it a year. We'll wait until he's at his most confident, his most public. And then you'll take everything." Evelyn stood, her back straighter than it had been in years. "Okay, let's begin." She left the building not as Evelyn Kirby, the broken waitress. She left as the architect of Charles Burden's destruction. For the next year, her life was a grueling routine. By day, she was still the ghost, scrubbing floors, serving coffee, her hands chapped, her face plain. She cashed her paychecks and bought diapers and baby food. But by night, her apartment, now a small private studio she could afford, was a war room. After Lily was asleep, Evelyn was on secure video calls with Arthur. She studied spreadsheets. She learned the names of every board member at Burden Global, their weaknesses, their loyalties. She read quarterly reports until her eyes burned. She saw the cracks Charles was trying to paper over. The failed tech venture in Asia, the quiet sell-off of stock by nervous partners, and all the while, her holding companies, the Odysseus Fund, the Kirby Strategic Group, were buying. Quietly, patiently. She saw Sienna posting pictures from a new yacht. "Celebrating our success." Evelyn smiled. "Celebrate, Sienna. Go ahead. It's all on borrowed time." She was no longer the woman cowering on the sidewalk. She was the storm on the horizon, gathering strength, waiting for the perfect moment to make landfall. The glass in Charles Burden's corner office shook when he slammed his fist on the desk. "What the hell is this?" he barked, glaring at his CFO. "It's the quarterly numbers, Charles. They're soft." "Soft? They're catastrophic." Charles paced, his $3,000 suit feeling like a straitjacket. First Henderson pulls out. Now the Singapore deal collapses. 2 partners in less than a month. It's that anonymous investor, isn't it? The Odysseus Fund. Who the hell are they? His CFO swallowed. "Legal can't identify them, sir. They're using shells. Very sophisticated ones. They've acquired almost 15% of our stock. They're moving fast." "Cowards," Charles spat, turning to the skyline. Someone was targeting him. Someone was trying to bring him down. He was surrounded by incompetence. At home, things were no better. Sienna was becoming demanding. "Charles, the gala is next week. I need the new Cartier necklace," she said that evening, scrolling through her phone, barely looking at him. "We're cutting back, Sienna, I told you." Sienna looked up, her perfectly sculpted brows rising. "Cutting back? We don't cut back, Charles. That's what poor people do. You promised me a life. The one you stole from that pathetic wife of yours. I expect you to deliver." "Don't call her that," he snapped, surprising himself. "What? Pathetic?" Sienna laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "That's what you always called her. Dramatic, unstable, pathetic Evelyn. Don't tell me you're growing a conscience. I'm telling you," he growled, "that I'm under incredible pressure, and your non-stop spending isn't helping." Sienna's eyes narrowed. She stood and walked over to him, running a manicured nail down his lapel. "Don't you forget, darling, I was there. I know exactly how you built this global empire. I know about the creative accounting that got us that first round of funding. You need me to be stable. You need me to smile for the cameras. And stability," she smiled, "is expensive." He watched her walk away, a cold dread mixing with his anger. He was trapped. Trapped by Sienna. Trapped by his debts. Trapped by this mystery investor who was bleeding him dry, 1 share at a time. He needed a win. He needed to show the world he was still Charles Burden. "The gala," he said, his voice hard. "We're going to make the Burden Foundation Gala the biggest event this city has ever seen. We'll announce the new children's hospital wing. We'll show them. We'll show them all." Sienna smiled. "Good, I'll pick up the necklace tomorrow." Meanwhile, across town, Evelyn sat with Lily on her lap, reading Goodnight Moon. Lily, now almost 2, pointed at the red balloon. "Boone," Lily said. "That's right, my love, a red balloon." Evelyn's phone vibrated. A text from Arthur. He's panicked. He's liquidating assets to cover his margins. He's planning a massive PR push at the Foundation Gala next Friday. Evelyn kissed the top of Lily's head. "It's time, baby girl." She dialed Arthur. "He's selling?" "He is." Arthur's voice was grim. "He's exposed. If we buy this next block of shares, we'll have a controlling interest. 51%. The company will be yours, Evelyn. What's your order?" Evelyn looked at her daughter, at the small, safe apartment that had been her sanctuary. She thought of the cold sidewalk, of the nurse asking, "Any support person?" "Buy it, Arthur," she said, her voice steady. "Buy it all." "And the gala?" Evelyn smiled, a slow, cold smile that her mother would never have recognized. "Oh, we're definitely going. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Please arrange an invitation. And Arthur? Get me a meeting with the board chair. Evelyn Torres. I think it's time she knew who her new partner is." That week, Evelyn did something she hadn't done in 2 years. She went shopping. Not at Goodwill. She walked into a boutique on Newbury Street, the kind she used to browse. The saleswoman looked at her simple clothes and prepared to be dismissive. "May I help you?" "Yes," Evelyn said, her voice carrying a new authority. "I need a dress for the Burden Foundation Gala. Something unforgettable." The grand ballroom of the Copley Plaza blazed with light. Chandeliers dripped crystals over the city's elite. Waiters moved like shadows, balancing trays of champagne. This was Charles Burden's night, a defiant show of power. He stood at the entrance, Sienna on his arm. She was glittering in diamonds and a crimson gown, her smile brittle. Charles looked tanned, confident, every inch the master of the universe. "Mr. Burden! Mr. Burden!" reporters shouted. "What do you say to the rumors of financial trouble at Burden Global?" Charles chuckled, a smooth, practiced sound. "Rumors are a poor man's entertainment. My company is thriving. Tonight proves it. We're here to raise millions for the children of Boston." That's the only story. The crowd applauded politely. For a moment, Charles almost believed his own lie. He was untouchable. And then the music faltered. Heads turned toward the grand staircase. A hush spread like a ripple, silencing the chatter. And there she was, Evelyn Kirby. She descended the stairs, every step deliberate. She was not the ghost from the diner. She was not the broken woman in the hospital. Her gown was liquid silver, stark and elegant, its clean lines hinting at armor. Her hair, once a mousy brown, was a rich chestnut, swept back to reveal a face that was no longer soft and pleading, but serene and sharp. She wore no jewelry except for her father's signet ring. She carried herself not like a guest, but like she owned the room. The crowd gasped. Whispers flew. "Is that Evelyn? My God, she looks incredible." Didn't he leave her while she was in labor? Charles's champagne flute slipped. His face drained of color. "What the hell is she doing here?" he hissed to Sienna. Sienna stiffened, her nails digging into his arm. "Ignore her. She's nobody." But no one else could. Evelyn walked straight into the center of the ballroom. The spotlight meant for Charles seemed to find her naturally. Charles forced a laugh, striding toward her. "Evelyn, I didn't know they let the help in." A few uncomfortable chuckles followed. Evelyn's eyes flicked to him, sharp and unbothered. "Hello, Charles. You look stressed. What do you want?" he snarled, his mask slipping. "Money? Is that it? You want to make a scene to get a bigger settlement?" "It won't work." "I don't want your settlement, Charles," Evelyn said, her voice calm but carrying. "And I was invited, by the board." The crowd gasped. Charles blinked. "The board? What are you talking about?" Evelyn turned slightly. Arthur Hawthorne stepped out from the crowd, looking impeccable. At his side was Evelyn Torres, the chairwoman of the Burden Global Board, her face grim. "Charles," Ms. Torres said, her voice sharp. "We need to talk." "We can talk tomorrow, Evelyn," Charles said dismissively. "Tonight is for the gala." "No," Ms. Torres said. "We're talking now. For months, an anonymous investor has been acquiring shares. As of yesterday, that entity, the Odysseus Fund, became the majority shareholder of Burden Global. They've called an emergency meeting." Charles's laugh was dry, cracked. "Shareholder, whoever it is, they should thank me. Without me, there'd be no company." "On the contrary, Mr. Burden," Arthur Hawthorne stepped forward. "They've acquired this company despite you. The new owner felt tonight was the perfect time to introduce herself." He gestured to Evelyn. She raised her chin. "It's me, Charles," she said simply. The room exploded. Gasps, whispers, the frantic click, click, click of camera phones. Charles staggered back, as if she had physically struck him. That's impossible. You're broke. You're a waitress. You're nothing." "I am my father's daughter," Evelyn said, her voice cutting through the noise. "And I inherited 20 million, a trust you and my mother never knew about. While you mocked me, I invested. While you called me pathetic, I was buying your debt. While you built your house of cards, I was buying the table it sits on. And tonight, I own it." The whispers turned to laughter, not at Evelyn, at Charles. You lied," he stammered. "You had $20 million and you let me think you were broke." "You never asked," Evelyn said, her voice glacial. "You just threw me out. You told me to die." Sienna, her face pale, began to back away, trying to slip into the crowd. "Going somewhere, Sienna?" Evelyn's voice stopped her. The crowd parted, leaving Sienna isolated. "You built your life on my ashes. You wore my clothes. You slept in my house. I hope you enjoyed it. Security will have you escorted out." 2 guards moved towards Sienna, who looked at Charles, her eyes pleading. "Charles, do something!" Charles couldn't even look at her. He was staring at Evelyn, his world imploding. "Evelyn, please," he whispered, his arrogance gone, replaced by a raw, pathetic fear. "Please, we can fix this. You and me. Together. We'll fire Sienna. We'll raise the baby." Evelyn looked at the man who had crushed her. She felt nothing. No, that wasn't true. She felt a cold, clean pity. "Fix this," she said. "There's nothing to fix. Ms. Torres?" The chairwoman stepped forward, her voice booming with authority. "As of this evening, by vote of the new majority shareholder, Charles Burden is removed as CEO and chairman of Burden Global, effective immediately." Charles dropped to his knees. Right there, in the center of the ballroom, the master of the universe knelt. "No. No. You can't. This is my company. It's my name." Evelyn looked down at him, at the empty shell of the man she had once loved. "You're right," she said. "It is your name, and you're the one who destroyed it." She turned, leaving him kneeling on the marble floor, the flashes of 100 cameras capturing his ruin. She didn't look back. She walked out of the ballroom, through the parted crowd, and into the cool night air, where a car waited. Inside, her babysitter, Maria from the diner, smiled. In the car seat, Lily was fast asleep. Evelyn climbed in, kissed her daughter's forehead, and whispered, "We're free." The aftermath was brutal and swift. The Boston Globe front page was a photo of Charles kneeling, juxtaposed with Evelyn walking away, serene and powerful. The headline, "The Burden of Proof. Wife's Revenge Shakes Boston." Burden Global's stock cratered, then stabilized as Arthur Hawthorne, on behalf of the new owner, issued a statement promising a full audit, transparency, and new leadership. Evelyn Kirby was named interim CEO. Her first day, she walked into the office, not in a power suit, but in a simple, elegant dress. The employees, who had lived in fear of Charles's temper, stared in silence. She called an all-hands meeting. "I know what you're thinking," she said, standing not on a stage, but on the same floor as them. "You've read the stories. But this isn't about revenge. This is about redemption. Charles Burden built this company on ego and debt. We are going to rebuild it on integrity and value. Your jobs are safe. Your pensions are safe. The era of arrogance is over." She worked 18-hour days. She tore the company down to the studs, exposing Charles's creative accounting, his shell corporations, and his reckless deals. The audit revealed he was weeks from insolvency. He hadn't just been a bad husband, he was a terrible businessman. Charles, facing investigations from the SEC and multiple lawsuits from investors, lost everything. The brownstone was seized. His accounts were frozen. Sienna was gone. She had vanished the night of the gala, last seen at Logan Airport boarding a flight to Dubai. Her crimson gown and Cartier necklace were all she had left. The deepest cut, however, came from Eleanor. Her mother showed up at the corporate headquarters, demanding to see Evelyn. She pushed past security, her face a mask of frantic denial. "Evelyn, what have you done? You've ruined us. The family name. Charles." Evelyn met her in the lobby, her expression calm. "I did nothing, Mother. Charles ruined himself, and you helped him." I was trying to protect the baby," Eleanor shrieked, her voice echoing in the marble hall. "I was trying to give her a stable life." "You were trying to protect your social standing," Evelyn said, her voice cutting. "You chose a man who told your daughter to die over your own blood. You called me unstable. You called me dramatic. You tried to take my child." "Evelyn, please," Eleanor's voice broke, the arrogance crumbling. "He's lost everything. I've lost. I'll have nothing." "Yes, you will," Evelyn said. "You made your choice. You wanted stability. You chose his side. Now, live with it." Evelyn turned and walked back to the elevator, leaving her mother standing alone in the lobby, a ghost of a life that no longer existed. That, Evelyn realized, was the true reckoning. Months later, the company, rebranded as Kirby Strategic, was stable. Evelyn sat in the corner office. Her office. She'd had the dark, heavy mahogany desk Charles loved, replaced with a light oak table. The view of the city was clear. A picture of Lily, now a bright-eyed toddler, sat on her desk. Arthur Hawthorne knocked. "Ready for the meeting, Madam CEO?" Evelyn smiled. "Just Evelyn, please, Arthur." She stood, looking out the window. She wasn't a wolf. She wasn't a queen. She was a woman who had been pushed into the fire and had refused to burn. She had taken the pain, the humiliation, and the whispers, and she had built an empire from them. Not for revenge, but for her daughter. For the future. She thought of the women at the diner, Maria and Jen. She'd hired them both to run her New Foundation's outreach program, paying them triple what they'd made. She thought of Mrs. Petroff, her old neighbor, and sent an anonymous donation to her retirement fund. Justice wasn't just about tearing down the guilty. It was about lifting up the good. She smoothed her dress, picked up her files, and walked into the boardroom, ready for the next chapter. This story is a reminder that the world may try to define you by your weakest moment, but it is your resilience that writes your ending. Evelyn was told she was nothing, but she rebuilt herself into everything. She found her power not in the $20 million souls, but in her own worth, a lesson her betrayers learned far too late. If Evelyn's story of strength, dignity, and a second chance touched your heart, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their own power. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice and resilience. Let us know in the comments what part of Evelyn's journey spoke to you the most.